Hello and welcome to today's IFSEC Global webinar. I'm James Moore, editor of IFSEC Global, and I'll be the moderator for today's discussion, where we'll be exploring the question of whether there is a lack of ethnic and cultural diversity in leadership positions in security and safety. That question is only the start of the debate, though. With today's speakers, we'll also look at where challenges might remain to building a more inclusive environment, what the solutions might be, and discuss why ethnically and culturally diverse leadership and the overall workforce is so important. I know we've got a mix of professionals from both security and safety, and probably some from fire as well today. So thank you for joining. And for those in the health and safety sector who don't know me, IFSEC Global is the sister brand to SHP, which I'm sure you know well. And we cover security and fire safety news, the same as SHP does for safety. We'll get straight into the conversation and introduce the speakers shortly, but just a few very quick housekeeping notes from me first. Today's webinar will take the form of a panel discussion, so there's no presentations aside from some holding slides for you. We've got plenty on the agenda already to discuss, but this webinar is designed to be interactive. So please have a look at the dock of widgets, which should be at the bottom of your screen. These will allow you to do things like learn about today's speakers, take a look around, some additional resources, share this webinar and via social media outlets as well. Most importantly, it allows you to take part by asking questions through the Q&A section. As I mentioned, we do have lots on the agenda to discuss already, but towards the end of the webinar, there'll be some time for audience questions. So do send these in if you have any. Apologies in advance if we can't get through all of them, but we'll do our best and can always follow up afterwards. All we'd ask is just please keep them relevant and appropriate to the discussion. And if there's a particular person you're aiming that question towards, just put that at the start so I know who to ask. Just makes my job a little easier. Lastly, if you are experiencing any technical problems, please click the help widget found at the bottom of your screen or type your issue into the Q&A area and we will be glad to offer one-on-one assistance. And this webinar is being recorded, so within 24 hours, you'll receive a personalized follow-up email and a link to today's presentation on demand. So if you miss anything or have any internet dropouts, don't worry, you will be able to watch it back and share with your peers and colleagues and friends. So let's get into the topic at hand, shall we? Over the next hour, we're going to cover several topics, but all related to that question of ethnic and cultural diversity within safety and security, and particularly in leadership roles, where significant decisions can be made and change can be influenced. I think it's worth clarifying before we get into it that we've got two speakers from the UK here and one from the US. I'm aware much of the audience is from those regions as well. For that reason, we'll be focusing this in the context of the US and the UK specifically. I think in different regions of the world, the parameters of representation might be a little bit different, and therefore might be a bit of a slight change in the focus of conversation. Before we put this webinar together, we held a number of discussions with professionals in the security and safety fields to ask whether this topic was a topic that needed to be discussed. The overwhelming answer to that was yes, as you might have worked out by the fact we're here today. From conversations we had, and particularly myself in security, from my experience, the frontline operatives and the officers generally do come from quite diverse backgrounds, yet many feel this doesn't always translate to representation in leadership roles. It's often difficult to get exact statistics on these things, I think, but this is changing. Associations are doing a lot more, industry bodies are carrying out a lot more research, a lot more studies into the overall topic of diversity, equity, and inclusivity in all sectors, not just security and safety. But as an idea, a recent study by the Security Institute of around 700 plus responses found that 83% identified as white. And though that figure is representative of the wider UK population, the study pointed out that this doesn't go further into analysing whether senior positions are less ethnically diverse. And significantly, some additional responses in there also noted how they felt that people had been discriminated against because of their ethnic identity in the past. And that's a key reason for having this discussion, I think. Ultimately, for any profession to grow and evolve in today's environment, it needs to be open, diverse, and inclusive to ensure that there is diversity of thought, to ensure that those within it feel valued, and to show the next generation that security and safety are inclusive and are welcoming to anyone, regardless of race, regardless of ethnicity, religion, or cultural background. It's a conversation that we think is important to have anyway, and I'm delighted to be joined by our speakers today, each of who have kindly taken the time to provide their views and their experiences on the subject matter. So that's enough for me. I'll shut up a bit. I'll introduce today's panel and hear from each of them. Jay, do you want to go first? Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your role and your background in the safety sector?
Yeah, sure. I'm Jay Vekaria, Director of HSE and Risk Management at Visa Europe. I look after a large cluster of countries, including UK, most of Europe, and some of SAMIR. My background is very much focused in health and safety. I've done non-health and safety roles, both in operationals, FM, and the property sector, but very much a purist in health and safety. Started as a safety engineer, a graduate engineer in the railway, and worked myself up to a very multicultural, diverse company right now. And that's my main forte there.
Perfect, thank you. And Ella, how about yourself?
Hi there, my name is Ella Muers. I'm currently the Head of Health, Safety and Environment for Everton Football Club. Prior, I've done some time with Costain, Manchester Airport and Balfour's, all in health, safety and environment roles, and a bit of fire as well. So a really varied background in that respect in different industries.
Thank you very much. And finally, James, all the way from the US, thank you for joining us. Sorry, I think you're muted. Get that one out of the way.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you, James, and pleasure to be with you all. And I'm actually based in the Washington, D.C. area. I serve currently as the chairman of the board for Advancis US, which is an international software company that provides technology for security and safety and sort of the risk management areas. I've actually been in the industry probably for over 20 years, mostly in the technology sectors and digital areas. Have seen a lot of initiatives and events that's really important to kind of today's topic as well. And really a pleasure to be here. I think similar to what Jay said, I've had some of the privileges of working in 17 different countries across many different continents and seeing some of the challenges, but also benefits on the culture and diversity topic. So again, a pleasure to be here and look forward to our discussion.
Thanks, all of you. Yeah, 17 different countries. I'm trying to work out if I've visited 17 different countries, but so that's seriously impressive. Yeah, thanks all so much for joining today. I think to begin with, we can probably kick off with answering that question that we posed as the title of the webinar. And to remind ourselves and everyone, we're primarily thinking here about this from a UK and a US perspective. James, just sticking with you, what's your perspective on this question in the security sector? Do you think there is a lack of ethnic and cultural diversity in leadership roles?
I mean, I think yes. I mean, this is probably an easy yes, just because, again, in the security and safety industry, we've been traditionally, like you mentioned, the percentages in terms of your respondents, primarily male dominated field and industry for some time. In terms of really the US, same kind of challenges, I would say, in terms of just more need for that growth in terms of that diversity. But yeah, just to kind of answer the question, I would definitely say yes, and there's definitely more to be done.
Thank you. And Jay, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I kind of agree with James in the sense that I think I said this on our pre-meeting, that obviously there is a group of minorities and you can't always change the statistics depending on which country you're from. So for example, in UK, certain cultural diversities will be listed as a minority due to the population. However, I do agree that there is a lack of cultural diversity at leadership level in safety, because the primary customer that health and safety tends to in the construction industry or FM industry are very much operational levels from different minority backgrounds. However, at seniority level, there needs to probably be a bit more open-mindedness about understanding and accepting various cultures and diverse groups.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Ella, what about yourself? I guess during your career, have you seen that leadership positions have generally been occupied by people from a similar background? And is this maybe something that should be considered more when recruiting, whether it be internally or externally?
Yeah, I think so. I've seen, well, certainly the last 20 years, I've I've been working in the north of England. So again, even just across the UK, there's different catchments of diversity. So it's whether you're getting that fair representation for your region, not just a 85, 15% sort of split. So I've certainly seen it been a more dominated kind of leadership for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And just sticking with you here, Adam, for one more, you know, if as we've already answered, I think that we feel there is a lack of ethnic and cultural diversity. I guess the next thing we should probably ask is why that might be. I mean, certainly from conversations I've had in the security and risk sector, there are quite traditional routes into the profession. It might be from law enforcement or from the military. Is this something you've seen in safety as well, in terms of traditional routes coming into the sectors?
Yeah, definitely. Again, I'd say you have to look at the areas that you're working in. I mean, in location, are we supporting the local communities and understanding the people that we have in our areas, and are we representing the communities that we're serving in our roles, whether it is safety or security, and again, certainly seeing a strong influence from whether it's police, fire, or military background. It's quite a traditional, or it seems quite a normal route, that this is an option that suits well to people who are moving on from those roles. So we do see or I've certainly seen in my my experience, more people from those backgrounds, which is no bad thing, but it obviously just narrows the level of experience that we're getting into leadership roles.
Yeah, absolutely. And James, to come to you, is that something you've seen in security as well? And do you think it can contribute to, whilst there's nothing wrong with those backgrounds coming into into these roles, they've often got the right skill sets, and there's a reason for that. But do you think that can contribute to a lack of diversity, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think many of the folks that are probably on the podcast today, know that a lot of the senior leadership in security and safety in corporations, large corporations to even smaller companies, when they hire a security director or a vice president of corporate security and risk, a lot of their backgrounds come from, like in the US, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, like the FBI, the CIA. The Secret Service is a huge pool where you see a lot of Secret Service as they retire or kind of get near that point, they transition into the commercial field. So, that's definitely something that's very common. And obviously the military is another one, and law enforcement. So once you serve in the police, because you've had the badge, when people are looking for leadership roles, they're looking for somebody that's had that, right? And so it does kind of create this chasm also with age a little bit, because a lot of them are older in age rather than the younger, people that are just kind of wanting to enter the security market. So yes, I mean, I think what Ella said is totally accurate. And in the US, it's even more visible.
It's interesting you mentioned age. We've already had a question come in, and thank you, Adam, for asking this. And it kind of does relate quite closely to what you just said there. Is, do you think there is an issue with age as well, and getting younger people into the industry? And do you think that bringing in those people from similar backgrounds quite often, causes a bit of a gap, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely traditional mentality of security, that's almost the automatic gap that we as an industry have created. One thing I would say is a little twist to that is a positive, is that with entrance of cybersecurity into our physical security arena, we are seeing opportunities for younger generations that have that tech savviness and understanding the data side, where some of those leadership opportunities I see coming up, right? Where that'll start to sort of change and disrupt kind of this leadership role, just based on pure career paths and sort of the individual capabilities.
And does that also contribute to maybe different backgrounds, maybe different cultures and ethnicities and races coming into it?
Yeah.
That it's not the traditional roots.
That's right. So, I mean, I think, again, we can't predict the future, but I feel like there is some opportunities here that's being created with a little bit of this convergence disruption, where security and safety are not just functions, but you're actually needing to make decisions using technology and data, right? So based on data, making that information be more valuable, I think that's another interesting opportunity, as well as a change that we're, hopefully going to see. That's going to actually create some more diversity as well at leadership levels.
For sure. Jay, firstly, I guess, what are your thoughts on this?
Very much similar in the safety industry, as probably Ella will understand. There was a period where there was traditional safety, clipboard, pen, go around on site. Your average safety officer would know what construction is, have previous experience of construction. However, you're now entering a world where what was toolbox talks delivered manually are now taking place on TikTok, social media, digital auditing. So there is a large gap, and I have the privilege of sometimes mentoring a lot of younger generation practitioners who are coming in, and their thought process is completely against the clipboard and pen. It's more very much iPad, AI, even to a certain degree, and augmented reality, believe it or not, when they're holding their phones up and they're able to show hazards and stuff like that. So there's a huge gap, and there is a large opening for people to bring a fresh pair of eyes. And that's not just with regards to age. I think it's also regards to culture. We're at a point now where your traditional construction workers have now come from a multicultural background. Therefore, even the basic language you use to communicate simple safety rules can be manipulated in many different languages. Railways, for example, is a perfect example where you would have your toolbox talk, but demonstrated in a number of different languages just to hit home to your audience. So there's definitely that element. And with regards to technology, as James said, we're now entering in a state where your health and safety file that was this big is now literally just on a phone. Therefore, either the leadership evolve or they allow the new practitioners to come in to support that evolution to moving to a digital era. So yeah, I completely agree with that way that's going.
Yeah, and it's really interesting points, and the way that technology plays a role in bringing about different kind of changes, in not just in the landscape of how things are done, but also who buy and who's got the sort of skills and knowledge to do them, and then who moves into those leadership roles. Jay, you mentioned you do quite a lot of mentoring. Do you think that, firstly, would you encourage others to do that, and secondly, do you think that industries do enough to recruit from within and from leadership positions?
I think it's difficult to answer that question. So, for example, there's never enough mentoring or menteeing. So no matter what industry you work in, if you're able to connect to a person who could draw upon their experience to help guide your career progress, no matter what background you're from, no matter what diversity you're from, that's always a positive. So take that as an advantage. With regards to the latter part of the question, it's very much down to the fact that we're still subject matter experts. So it's really important that we still hold that to account. And that's where your key experience and skills do set in that. So does our industry do it quite a bit? I think in safety, there's a number of institutions that do that. There's a Young Leaders Forum. There's various institutions that try to get as many webinars like this, for example, in place. But it's also hands-on experience, tapping into what James said about the insecurity, for example, your ex-military, your ex-police force people who then go into commercial roles. They bring a wealth of knowledge, and sometimes it's not always just about your academics. Sometimes just tapping into 5% of that knowledge will give you an amazing platform to be able to demonstrate and lead your case for growth. So my view is it should always be encouraged. Whether there's a lack of it or not, that's down to the subject matter expertise and the industry working.
Yeah, absolutely fair. And I've, having spoken to quite a few people, people in the security and fire sectors in the last couple of years, they all talk about how important mentoring and building relationships through networks, through associations, is in these industries. think maybe sometimes they can be within a larger business, they can feel a little bit siloed at times. You're trying to educate and guide and advise a lot of the time, and to have other people who are doing the same things, just maybe not in the same company, is super important. And that building that networking, I think, builds in that inclusivity element. I like to think anyway. And it's we've had a question or sort of a point come in here, which is from Alison. Just wondering if there's another angle to consider alongside recruitment, such as the retention of ethnic and culturally diverse professionals. It's not just getting people through the door; it's ensuring the work environment is conducive to keeping them. And yeah, it's an interesting point, and it is one that, as I say, it's not just about the barriers to entering the sector; it's also about the barriers to staying in the sector. Ella, is this something you've thought about or talked about before, or seen where people, it's not been quite as inclusive, or as people might think it has been?
Yeah, I think what's one thing to consider is like diversity isn't always visible. So it's not always based on skin color or obvious physical attributes. So being considerate of even basic language used can make a more inclusive environment. Yeah, you don't need to know people's personal histories, backgrounds, culture. But I think we just can be a bit more, or create a safer environment, a psychological safer environment. And that for me is something that I've experienced myself, because people might not know my background, and therefore harmless invites for a bacon butty every Friday for me can be quite well, it's not very inclusive. I don't eat bacon, but the way it was delivered can be very much about kind of like, this is what we do and this is what there is, and it starts it starts removing people from that opportunity. So how do we build and be conscious of what we do and how we operate and how we include other people? I think it ties into what Alison says as well about retaining people. People stay where they feel welcome and they feel valued. And if we're creating these safe environments, it adds to that job satisfaction, because we know we're not just happy based on our pay packet at the end of the month. It's having a really good day at work, feeling like we're valued, and making progress in our industry. So I think those kind of conscious thoughts are really key for improving diversity and inclusion, and then retaining those good people that we do get.
Yeah, really good point. I don't know if James or Jay, you had anything to add. To James, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, I think retention is another big factor to create the opportunities for people that come in to stay and to grow and learn, and then also have the opportunity to be in a leadership role. And so I think retention is another key word, right, that we can't forget. I do feel that it goes right into our topic today, right? That ethnic diversity and kind of the culture diversity in leadership, is that a gap? And I think it's very important, because people leave because they don't feel comfortable. In most cases, with other surveys that I've seen, it's really their supervisors or those leaders that they are working for. If they feel not comfortable and welcomed and accepted, that's number one reason why people go, right? So that's where you lose a lot of good talent and people that could really help your organization. And so to me, it's like a top down, but also a bottoms up approach in terms of sort of that retention, because again, you got to create that culture, like what Ella's talking about. And culture doesn't happen because of one person. It's got to be something that evolves. And I've seen that, I mean, I've had the fortunate opportunities to work for both very small companies to very large companies. And again, creating that culture does not happen overnight. But when you have that, it's almost like magic, right? You can really start to retain people that you really see value, and they also feel that value. So again, I think, leadership as well as the retention, and then having those mentoring opportunities, that Jay talked about. I think that's how we can give kind of back to the industry in terms of being, I mean, your time is really one of the most precious resources and opportunities. So I think it kind of all connects the dots.
Yeah, I agree with both. I think Ella and James both said it here. It's not about the color of your skin or your background. It's got nothing to do with your nationality. I think it's got to do with having a culture where the discussion of talking about diversity should not feel awkward. If you are within a company where you feel awkward talking about it, that's a good thing, because that means you're raising awareness. And it's very similar to mental health. 5-6 years ago, many people felt awkward talking about if they're having a bad day or if they're having a mental health issue. And now it's opened the barriers where leadership, operational levels are able to foster that and give that discussion point a bit more empathy and support. And that's very much like the diversity talk that we have right now. If a business is able to foster an environment where you no longer feel awkward talking about it, that's a great start, because that then helps leadership and operational level have a two-way communication where you're culturally open-minded. For example, for me, I notoriously know, so I always thought UK was the best leading in terms of health and safety. We're the flag bearers when it comes to law, regulation, and so on like that. So on paper, the UK may look good, but culturally, when you look across Europe and you understand how people operate and the way of working, some of the even the religious values or some of the backgrounds that they bring in and the way they operate, wow, it's a minefield. You open up so many doors and you think, wow, if we were to share those practices and foster that innovation, UK or any other countries could not just be flag bearers, but you could almost create a consistent approach across global standards. And that, I think, is real diverse leadership, by being able to go into understanding, yes, if I go to Spain, there will be a shutdown because the guys appreciate their sleep down modes at 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. If I go to Sweden, the ergonomic standards are well high compared to us, but there's always something you take away, but not having that awkward feeling. So if anyone is in a position, or if you're within a company, it's okay to have that awkward feeling, because that raises the point of the discussion, but the aim is to break that awkward feeling down, and then you're in a better place.
Yeah, it can be, and you know, speaking as a white male, sometimes it can be a little bit, it does feel a little bit awkward to put yourself in a position to be taught to openly talk about it. You don't necessarily feel like you have the right, or whatever it might be, and that's, I think, having spoken to lots of people about this and yourselves, that's not how it should be. You should want to talk about it. You should want to break down the barriers, because that makes the conversation less awkward. And the more you talk about things, the more the experiences get shared. I think that's when you see real systemic change. Is there any, Jay, just sticking with you here for a second, are there any ways that you've seen about how that can happen, how you can break down those awkward conversations?
I can, and I just saw a question, funny enough, in the Q&A, but I think it was about an attendance mentioning they feel like they have to work extra hard just to be heard or seen. And that is quite an awkward feeling, but that's also down to your cultural background. For example, if you're brought up, and I'll just put this out there, in a South Asian community, your anticipation is to be an accountant or a doctor. You know, you have that invisible pressure that's put on your family. And I'm sure James would have a similar story when we had the pre-meeting. And unfortunately, that pressure, or those values that are instilled into you from a young age because of your forefathers and so on that are maybe migrants or coming into the country, it does make you feel very, very awkward, because you automatically instantly say, well, I have to work double as hard just to be heard, or I have to work 3 times hard. But if you really, really draw down and look at where those pressures came from, and I guess adapt the conversation to explain to the person that's listening, this is why I feel this pain, or this is why I feel that pressure, that would help remove the awkward barrier. Because like you said, as an Englishman yourself, someone, you would probably realize, wow, I didn't realize it was that difficult. And that's all it is, just that little trigger that then help remove the awkward barrier. So yeah, I completely appreciate, and I think from coming from a South Asian community, being Indian heritage myself, I call myself British Asian. I was born in Britain. I love the nationality who I am, but I also respect my culture and heritage from where they are. I absolutely love the industry I work in and the jobs I do. Have I faced a point where I feel as, oh, I wish I had maybe 1 or 2 generations ahead, so I was able to maybe go to private school or have some of the hobbies or some of the discussion points as others. But I have to accept that I'm still a minority. However, I'm more than happy to explain the rationale behind my thinking, because it was put upon me from the forefathers of those that came through the immigrant. And like I said, it's about open and talking about that pressure, and that's what helps.
Ella, is this something you've experienced or you've seen from colleagues as well?
Yeah, I was about to say, not just accountant or doctor, you've got to throw in lawyer. I think I've seen in our family chat. So yeah, it's very, very similar from a Middle Eastern background, sort of second generation in the UK. You know, being in a health and safety role, I feel I'm working really hard to try and be as successful as if I was in a different type of role, which is bonkers, really. To prove yourself, prove that my ideas are valid, as mentioned in the questions there. So I think there's something there to be said about what culture are we in now, but also the positive being is that we're having this discussion today, because maybe some of the people who are on who are dialed in are in more junior roles, and they're going to be our leaders in the next few years. And we do have that mix, and I think that for me is really that's the good stuff, isn't it? Like, this is coming, and I think what I've seen in a previous role is they did reverse mentoring, which I think is a great idea. You know, not just having the leader mentoring someone coming up through their career, but how can you encourage the experience, the knowledge that young people, I don't mean that to sound rude or patronizing, but you know, different experiences, different generational experiences, how do we can encourage and share that knowledge in both directions. It isn't purely from the time served leadership role, and it's something that maybe is an idea to consider, especially in terms of diversity and inclusion. There's a great opportunity there where people are, where it's comfortable and safe to do so. It's something to consider.
And yeah, the reverse mentoring thing is really interesting, and it is in many often, you know, young professionals don't have the experience or the sector experience maybe, but they do have different experiences of growing up maybe in a different time, in a different environment, where DE&I has been at the forefront of the conversation, and they might just had a different experience, and therefore it might be something that they can talk to leaders about in their own industries. James, is there anything you wanted to add to that point?
Well, I mean, I think it's pretty much been covered really well. I think I had a chance to be serving on the board of a company about 10 years ago, and was the first minority on the board. But also, I think I was the youngest at that time as well. And so, you know, one of the things that I see is that when some of us have those kind of chances to, kind of interact with the leadership as well of the companies, that's where we can share kind of the feelings and thoughts and what the environment is like, right? So that's kind of how we were able to make some adjustments and pivot and really create a different culture. So I have sentiments for those that are asking us some of those questions. But again, change doesn't come automatically. It does take effort and it takes time. And so really my comment is just to encourage those that are asking us those questions, not to kind of give up, but really, try to have your experiences be communicated, and, whether it's through opportunities or just through conversations, because again, that's how I've seen things work, right? With more communication and more common understanding, there's less resistance. And again, my experience has been a little bit on the positive side, that once those, communications and barriers are kind of broken down or reduced, people really want this to happen, right? So I've had very little resistance on anyone saying, oh, that's not something we want to do. It's everyone wants to do it, but some of them needs more communication and explanation of why and what we're trying to do. And then I think that's, part of that kind of the opportunity for change. And so, encourage those to definitely kind kind of try to seek those chances to communicate.
Yeah, and just to sort of read this point out actually that was sent in, because I know these don't come through and feed through to the front end. We had a comment which said, as an ethnic minority female in my first health and safety job in the UK, I felt like a figurehead or a statistic to fulfill a requirement. I had to work extra hard to prove myself as opposed to the other white male staff in health and safety. I had to struggle to be heard and not let my colleagues pawn off my ideas as theirs. And that was kind of what we've just been talking about, and the comment that sort of Jay mentioned that he'd spotted in the chat. So thank you for sharing your experiences, and I'd encourage those watching, please do share your experiences as we've discussed already. That is, how people understand what and starts the conversation again, and it brings in different experiences, different ideas, and that's important. So please feel free to share. I might not be able to get the chance to read out everyone's, but yeah, it's always important. We've looked obviously a little bit so far at the issue and some of maybe the traditional reasons that might be behind it. But I guess the next question is what about why? And by why, I mean, why is this topic important? Why is it important? And why is diversity, equity, and inclusivity playing an ever more central role in organizational and professional sustainability programs, in all sectors, not just security and safety? But I guess the key question is, and this might seem obvious to many, but sometimes it's not. When you sort of drill down into the detail, why is having an ethnically and culturally diverse workforce, particularly leadership positions, important? Jay, if I start with you, if I may, what would be your response to that?
I think it's the benefits of learning from different cultures. Learning from different backgrounds. I'm fortunate. I work for a multinational company, and every meeting I go to, I'm either learning how to say hello or goodbye in a different language, or I'm talking in different time zones and learning about different bank holidays or religious days and so on like that. And the growth mindset it sets is amazing, in the sense that even if I take 5% away, when I'm having dinner with my family, I get to talk to them about something I learned new. And by having that diverse workforce means my decision making is completely the decision making is also evolved, in the sense that I could factor in a bit of empathy, understand where cultures come from. Also, being heard is really important. The delegate that you said she had to feel as she had to work twice as hard. I would love for her to contact me, because I'm more than happy to mentor and go through that situation. But it's this thing about, sometimes you do feel as it's just a tick box, and you feel as you've been given a position because you come from a minority background, and like how Ella said, it's that sudden pressure all of a sudden that, oh, you're the first minority on the board. Does that mean you're now leading the way? Are you expected to be this wonderful leader that's going to be able to set the trend? So by having a diverse workforce, you're able to openly talk about those pressures that you don't always see. And sometimes people just learn a bit more and realize, actually, do you know what? It's not just a tick box exercise. There's a bit more to it. So I can understand that retention's better. For example, in Visa, we celebrate special occasional days where we would give free lunch if it's, let's say, a Turkish bank holiday, or if it's if it's a French bank holiday, because that's important, just because ultimately everyone should be heard, everyone's entitled, and everyone's adding value. So why not share that value? So I think the benefits are humongous when it comes to having that.
Yeah, and it's little things like that, whether it be a free lunch, whether it be easy things that can be done, I guess, even if it's just a sort of scheduled coffee break or something for everybody in the office, to not just different cultures and different days like that, but you've got things like World Mental Health Day and all this kind of stuff, and to have those, until you put a reason for people to think about it, I guess it doesn't always get seen. Ella, what's your thoughts on this? Why do you think it's so important to have a diverse community in the safety and security sector, but primarily safety for you?
I think with that question, we're a diverse country. So we should, and we're looking after a workforce that's diverse. So we need that leadership to be diverse, to understand and to support our teams. I think there's that kind of, you cannot be what you cannot see. So for us to really get this right, we need to represent the people that are in our communities for us to keep our people safe. We need to understand who they are, what they do, how they operate, and what they need to do it safely. And we can only do that by representing them well, not it just being a kind of cut and paste of the same kind of person, same experience, same age, same background. It just doesn't lead to good answers. I think as well, when this webinar was advertised, it talks about the better leadership groups having a more diverse board, for that productivity, and you just think this speaks volumes. In terms of promoting it, this is the numbers, these are the facts. It's not just the friendly, looks good, tick box type of thing. There is reason behind it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think for everyone watching, there should be a link to that McKinsey article, I think, which is where it came from, and the stat you were talking about, Ella. And I saw a similar stat today. It's International Women's Day today, as hopefully everybody is aware. And there was a similar stat in terms of, well, I can't remember the exact statistic, but a percentage of organisations are often better and more inclusive when there are women in the executive leadership positions. So absolutely, and your point there about, we live in a diverse country, or we live in a diverse culture, therefore it's important to have diverse leaders and diverse decision makers, is a really interesting one. As part of these pre-webinar sort of chats that I had, one of them was with Dr. Peter Steenstedt. Sorry, Peter, if I mispronounced that, but who works in the Security Institute in the security sector, and he made that point, and sort of got me thinking about it in terms of if we're going to respond to, particularly in security or safety, to risk or crisis management situations, that it's often really important to have a diverse team and a diversity of thought to understand those situations properly. You might not otherwise, if you've got everyone coming from the same background, they might have really good experience in the day-to-day processes, but they might not be as open-minded or be able to sort of see things the way other cultures or ethnicities or races or religions might see things, and therefore you might not fully understand the whole picture, I guess is my point. James, what are your thoughts on this? I guess particularly, what are the benefits of having a diverse and diverse leadership in business?
I almost feel like it's not just the why we should have it, but it's almost a requirement in terms of how I see businesses, kind of growing and succeeding. Because there is I think a unique strength in diversity. One of the areas is in innovation. So when you have the diverse, kind of backgrounds and experiences, degrees, and even personal backgrounds that kind of come together in a business, I've seen that's where innovation thrives, right? That's where change and ideas and things really come together. So as a company of, any security or safety or any of these industries, I think that it's a mandatory requirement to really push for that, because there is so much more positives that you can gain from that, right? Just like your surveys have shown. So to me, the diversity helps drive innovation. That's one, and that's why we need it. The other thing is the culture part that we talked about. It's like trying to build the greatest smart city in the world. Well, if you're not safe and people don't feel safe and secure when they come and visit, you're not going to get anywhere. You could build the biggest skyscrapers or the biggest, fanciest hotels, but if it's not safe and secure and that culture is not there, it's the same thing in companies, and diversity really helps to drive that type of positive culture. And so again, that's why I think we have to really see that. And then lastly for me is, people love to have fun, right? So if you feel like you go to work and that's it, I mean, I think the like even the food and the entertainment, I think those are big things. We talked about free lunches. I'm a Korean descent American, living here in the U.S. and people love Korean barbecues, and that's like a fad now, right? So having that diversity also helps to create that fun environment. And so I think to me, there's definitely the common, business-oriented things like innovation and kind of technology, creativity happening, but also the fun and that culture that you create, right? So I think that's really the reason I would say, why it's really important for us to try to do this.
Do you think, James, sticking with you here in the US, it's slightly different? I know in our pre-call you mentioned that maybe, some people don't, certainly people in the US don't always travel outside of the US as much as maybe people in Europe might, for example,
sure,
or Asia. Does that play a factor? Does that have a factor in this discussion in terms of needing to go that extra step in to try and explain why this is important and why it is beneficial?
Yeah, I mean, all of you in the European countries know, I mean, the US is like having 50 countries all in one little landmass. And you got all these different, things happening in this, big continent. And so, yes, in the US, I think, we can pretty much travel across the country and never use your passport, right, to go overseas or to any other country. And I think that, like most people don't have that opportunity to travel to many different places for long periods, right? They may just go for a couple of days or it's more of a holiday. But I think that because it is a big country, it is also where you really don't have to travel much unless there was a need from a business side. There is also that extra gap, right? Where if you've not seen things or experienced things, it's hard for you to comprehend what that could be like. My kids have really not traveled outside or gone over the Pacific or the Atlantic Oceans, right? And so they're going to get a chance to do that this year, and they're really looking forward to it. But I do feel like there is that other physical challenge, right? Just the distance in terms of being able to see other cultures and other kind of ethnic groups and other kind of sort of that experiences, which does make some of the things in the U.S. also a little bit more challenging. Again, because you can just go in a car, you don't ever have to travel across and go overseas to experience some of these things. So, I think, that's another good point is that, we do want to encourage people to, look for those kind of opportunities to interact with the different cultures and different countries, because for me, I've learned a lot just being able to spend time, with people across the globe.
Absolutely. We've had lots of questions coming in and comments. Thank you, everyone. And some of them, talk, and I can kind of try and wrap up a couple of them into one, really, in terms of specific training programs or diversity initiatives that you guys might have seen in your businesses or organizations, or it might even be in associations that you represent. Starting with you, Ella, if that's okay, is there anything that you've seen or you've been a part of that you would encourage others to do or has worked in to create a more diverse and inclusive environment for different cultures and ethnicities?
I think I've been really lucky here at Everton. I've joined a football club that's really keen to promote diversity and inclusion. We've been working closely with the Premier League on a coaching program in more ethnically diverse and female coaches. So there's some, obviously not just in health and safety, but there's different activities going on to promote that diversity and inclusion. I think people who work in some of the larger businesses will all have experience of various sort of employee networks that are that exist to support the various groups, whether it's women, ethnic or cultural diversity, veterans, and so on. So I think there's lots of great activities there, and what I've seen, which I think is really positive, is you don't have to be female to be part of a women's network. It's about being a positive ally as well. And I think that's something that we could all encourage, certainly. But yeah, it's been so far really, really positive in football. And I think that's something that I'll certainly, if I ever moved on from this role, it's something that I'd take with me to say, okay, I've seen it done well here. So I'd certainly encourage it elsewhere.
Absolutely. I apologise. I realise I'm drinking out of a vessel with an Arsenal sort of badge on it, which which I do apologise for. I didn't realise until that you mentioned then. Jay, what about yourself? Is there anything you've seen or been a part of that you encourage others to do in their companies?
I mean, I think go ahead, James.
Okay, I think for me it was just keep an open mind. I've noticed companies do that a bit more. Keep an open mind that it's not just always about experience. So, understand that it's a balancing act between experience and cultural experience. And sometimes the cultural experience can bring in a lot more value. I know that's very difficult, as James even mentioned, in subject matter expert fields or the industry. Try break that barrier and just be a bit more open-minded. That's a commitment that I'd like to do and ensure other companies try and do that.
Absolutely. And James, Claire's written in and followed up with your point about agreeing that bringing out a fun element to a meeting often gets more done and brings about a bit of innovation. And food, as you mentioned, I know you mentioned the pre-call, is a great way of doing this. Absolutely agree. Korean food is great. I really like it, and it's a good way of, and it's often a good way of, I guess, showing other cultures and backgrounds, some of your cultures and sharing those experiences through the mechanism of food. Are there other ways you've done this aside from that you'd encourage others to do, or any initiatives that you've seen?
Yeah, I think definitely there's no one size fits all in kind of that solution, because I think every company, every group, every business and organization does have some, differences where one formula may not quite work the way that we thought. What I also, love about the security and safety industry is that, there's not that many industries where everybody that is involved are actually going after the same mission. It's to save people's lives and to, protect the brand, as well as to protect your assets, which people and properties are part of, right? So we have an advantage a little bit here where every single person working in the security and safety industry, they're after that same mission, to protect people, lives, asset, and the brands. And so using that as a common sort of opportunity and target, I think that, again, introducing some of these kind of the ways that we can change the conversation, because, that being the same mission, the other same thing about any culture, that I can imagine and I've ever been to, nobody, does not enjoy, there's no one that does not enjoy food and having fun and having some fellowship, right? So to me, if you did want an equation from me, it's fun, food, and fellowship. Create the diversity and cultural diversity and equity pieces into those three categories, and then let the business pieces come on top of that, right? So the foundation really being more social, right? Like where you really get to know people and understand where they're coming from. And I think that's really the foundation that we want to start with, because oftentimes in business, we're all about P&L, right? What's the profit going to be? What's the loss? What's the dollar values or the pound, in your case. But I think if we really kind of shuffle the priorities to people being that priority, right? The social elements and the food, fun, and fellowship being part of that, I think there could be some, comments maybe a year from now where people have experienced some changes by incorporating some of that. But excellent question. And hope that's something that people can take away.
Certainly, I will be taking away food, fun, and fellowship. I like that as a tagline. It's good. It's the 3 Fs. Very, very good. a couple more questions. We haven't got a lot of time, and I've realised this hour has just disappeared. So thank you everyone for bringing in all your questions, for bringing in some experiences, and for the three of you for speaking so eloquently and well about this subject. There's often an accusation, obviously, that when organisations and companies do talk about diversity, equity, and inclusive programs, people say it might be box ticking. Jay, do you think there's a way of ensuring that you're not box ticking and that these are authentic changes that they're bringing about, and showcasing, and proving that, I guess, is there?
I'm not sure. I don't think there is a direct way, because even if the business was very honest and humble about it, the person on the receiving end, if they are from a minority or diverse background, will still have that vulnerability. And it can be seen as another view where even if they accept that role, people around them in the organization may feel like it was a tick box exercise. So the straight answer is I don't know with that. I do think, though, by talking about and raising awareness, people may feel comfortable. So the person that feels like they're a tick box exercise is able to openly share that in a conversation and meeting by saying, did you actually recruit me for my experience and my skills, or did you recruit me because I'm the only minority around the table? And I think that day will come. I think it's coming very soon, in the sense that people are able to have the confidence to talk about it more, and the receiving end is able to listen to it more and explain, because most companies are doing diversity training. Most companies do have a recruitment strategy prior to recruiting the person, but it is very much about authentic leadership and the person who you recruit ultimately. So neither party should take offense by if someone gets a job or if there's a number of small minorities. It's very much about authentically who you are and what you represent and how that works, and whether you fit in the business. So I think it will come, but it will take time.
Yeah, time. As you said, everything does take time. These things, and to rush these things through will probably suggest that they are becoming a box ticking exercise, which is the opposite of what everybody wants. And I think sometimes that can actually be a little bit more damaging than do the good that it may be intended initially. I guess the summary points was I was going to ask was, is there one thing that everybody would suggest? But I think we've already covered that. There's one more question that's quite an interesting one here. Ella, if you don't mind, do we need more training on diversity of communication styles? I've seen many from diverse cultures being labelled as aggressive because they use a different language or just a different style. So I guess how important is training in communication styles and understanding different cultures and about this?
I think it's key, isn't it? Communication is always key. I think it goes, Jay mentioned it as well, that authentic leadership, being genuine. So if you can encourage those genuine conversations where we're engaging with each other with no negative intent, until we can establish what good communication is, because terminology changes, and what people like and what people don't like is different. Everyone's different. So it's about encouraging that conversation and engaging with your teams. I think as an example, I was talking to a friend today about on my team, English wasn't his first language, so his emails would sometimes come across quite blunt because it was a second language. I can't speak a second language, so he could communicate what was needed. It came across a little bit abrupt sometimes because of it was a translation. So I had a couple of people raise it to me that his emails were a bit blunt. And I had the conversation of it's a second language. We have to understand that it's a direct translation potentially. Working with my team, it was like, well, if you ever need any help with this, or if you ever want to talk through an email, I'm more than happy to assist with local kind of slang, colloquialisms that we use to soften language that we don't necessarily realize we're doing it because we've grown up with it. And I think it's how do we help each other? And it goes in both directions to support each other on that. But without question, communications and getting that support is really key to me, I think.
Absolutely. It's a great point to sum it up on in terms of that communication element and the discussion, just opening this discussion out. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have for questions today. Thank you everyone for sending them in. There's a couple that I didn't get the chance to answer, and if you do want to get them answered, we can give you an email afterwards. If anybody wants to give me an email or any of the speakers, I'm sure they'll be happy to. Thank you everyone for sending everything in, for attending, and a huge thank you to Ella, Jay, and James for joining and sharing your experiences and your opinions with us. It's really important, and it's a subject that is increasingly important. I don't think I need to do much concluding here. I think the speakers have done that for me. But something that I picked up on when preparing for this webinar and throughout today's discussion is that yes, and as Jay mentioned earlier, these conversations aren't always easy for everyone. And that's okay. I think it's okay to feel awkward, because if you're feeling awkward, that probably means you're trying to talk about it, you're thinking about it, or you want to talk about it. And the more people that do talk and share their experiences and listen to others sharing theirs, the easier these conversations get, and we move into a place, as Jay said, where it doesn't feel awkward anymore. And that's where we ultimately want to get to. There might not be definitive answers to all the questions we posed today, but the point of having these discussions is really simply to open that conversation, so that the industry, the security, the safety, the fire safety industries do feel inclusive more than anything. They're sectors that provide so many opportunities and specialisms and career paths that I certainly didn't know about until I started working in them, and I'm sure many others don't. But it's so important to not, I suppose, close the door before it's even, you even got your foot in it, to people who may not see it as an option. It's so important, I think, to show that no matter your racial or your ethnic or your cultural background or your religion or your gender or your sexual orientation, they are professions that are open to everyone, and this sector will welcome you. Before I go, I'd just like to point out a similar discussion we held towards the back end of last year, where we discussed female representation in the fire safety and security sectors. It's available as a podcast on IFSEC Global. If you want to hear more of my voice, I apologise in advance, but or as a watchable video on demand. I believe that is in the resources section on your console, so do have a watch or a listen of that. It's a hugely insightful debate, and as a reminder, it is International Women's Day, with the theme of this year being Embrace Equity. It would be remiss of me as well not to highlight that we'll look forward to seeing the safety, security, fire and facilities management communities at London's Excel between the 16th to the 18th of May for IFSEC, FireX, Safety and Health Expo and Facility Show. Registration is open. I know the speakers have talked about coming along already, so you can meet them there. But you can get your free ticket in the link in the resources section as well. And finally, don't forget this webinar was recorded. You will receive the follow-up email with details and a link to today's presentation on demand, and we'll make to look at it easily available on IFSEC Global and SHP in the coming weeks. So I'd really encourage you to share however you wish with your colleagues, with your peers, with your friends, family, whoever it might be, and who may not have been available to listen to the event. But on behalf of Ella, Jay, James, and I, thank you for your time and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.